بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. لله تبارك وتعالى. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. I praise Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. I thank Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, and I ask Him to raise the status of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all those who follow them in excellence until the day of judgment. And I ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to grant us pure and sincere intentions. Insha'Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, I want to have some reflections on the issues that we discussed last night on the Black Imams Roundtable. I try to make it a habit the following morning after the Black Imams Roundtable to reflect and review some of the issues that we discussed. And the reason I do that is it gives us the opportunity to establish the information in our minds and hearts, because we get to see it isolated from any other discussion, just what we wanted to focus in on. So we were having this discussion, and it's a series of discussion which will continue. Next week, we'll be talking about al-fiqh. And the point that we're making is, how does all this information become practical in our lives? As we say, when the rubber meets the road. In other words, the practical application of everything we're talking about. And the issue of al-aqidah is an issue of the utmost importance in Islam. And sometimes I think because of deviation, people try to downplay the high level of importance that al-aqidah has in our salvation. In another way, it is easier to be intellectually lazy and not have to go through the issues that requires one to critically think and research and evaluate information it's easier just to stay intellectually lazy and avoid that and hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would accept from us our outward practice. In reality, that's not real. It's the opposite way in reality. What do I mean? If your belief is sound and you actually did nothing, ultimately, you would receive salvation even after torture. I'm gonna repeat that so it doesn't go over our, past us and over our heads when you think about what I just said. In reality, if you don't do anything, while your belief is sound, you will attain salvation even if you have previous torture for falling short in acting. But the opposite does not hold true. What is the opposite? If I outwardly practice everything, but I didn't have the correct belief, I would not receive everlasting salvation in the hereafter. I would enter the hellfire as an individual. I'm not talking about me necessarily, me as an individual. A person would enter the hellfire and be tortured forever with no interruption and would never get out that torture. That's the status and the importance of belief. So it's not something we can just bypass, ignore. It is something we must get right. And hence, it was an integral part of the prophetic mission from the time Allah revealed the Quran to Sayyidina Muhammad to his death. His entire life, he taught the correct belief, the creed of Islam. His entire mission, that was never left out. So don't ever get tired of talking about Al-Aqidah. Does that mean that we don't have other concerns? No. But even with other concerns, our foremost concern is dying on the correct Aqidah. That's our foremost concern. So even though we may address other issues and other concerns, never let someone tell you the fallacy that we have more important issues. We don't have more important issues. There is no issue more important than having the correct belief. Do we have important issues? Yes. Do we have other essential issues? Yes. Do we have more important issues? Absolutely not. Because any other issue is going to be accepted or rejected ultimately by the primary issue, which is the correct belief. Then I want to share something with you about this issue. Even those who disagree with Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah, Al-Ashari wal Maturidi, or they differ with Al-Hanabila, such as Al-Wahhabiyya, Al-Salafiyya, even they say the same thing, however, they just say it's our creed. Right? They agree that the most important issue is the issue of the creed, the issue of al-aqidah, the issue of at-tawheed. They agree with that. However, they just think that their creed is the correct creed, but they don't disagree that it's the most important thing in Islam. And this should be clear to us. in our mind. So when someone says we got more important issues, that means that person didn't understand Islam in the first place. Because there's no more important issue than that, because that's the issue by which salvation is contingent upon. With that being said, we are confronted with various understandings in relation to the creed. And we talked about what is relating to us the most in our given environments. And in our given environments is those three things, those three understandings rather. The understanding of the creed by the methodology of the Ashari and the Maturidi. That's one approach. The methodology of understanding the creed according to Al-Hanabila. And the understanding of the creed by Al-Wahhabiyya, who call themselves as Salafiyya. So we are confronted basically as Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, and under the name of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, with these three understandings. And I was thinking about this a lot, that this issue has never been clear in our communities among the masses of people. And I think that's an injustice that was perpetrated against us. And I would say from no fault of our own. It is because we've received information from others and we just blindly trusted them without having our own research teams to review and examine the information that we received. This is very important. We've accepted information, no matter where it came from, as a people, without having our own research teams evaluate that information. And I believe that's something we must do. And all praise due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're at the state where we can do that. There was a time when we couldn't do it at all. We didn't have the ability or the access to do it. It's not the same anymore. And this takes, on our part, a level of cooperation and a level of humbleness. And when I say cooperation, we must use all our resources to do the job. And humbleness is to accept when we can't do an aspect of it, to defer to those who are more qualified in that area than us for the collective good. But also, we must distinguish, and this is challenging, from the one who has the ability to freely examine from the one who feels intellectually confined by an inferiority complex towards others. And this is important. So the person, for instance, has the ability to do it, but he can't think outside the one who programmed him in the beginning. I'm going to repeat that. The person has the ability to do the research. But because the one who programmed them has them feeling inferior, they won't do the research. They just defer to their master, in parentheses or quotation marks, their master. You don't want to think for yourself, but you have the ability to do it. You can actually do the research yourself and evaluate the information that comes to you. But because of your dependency on certain people or certain groups, you refuse to do the work that you're capable of doing to the extent you're capable of doing it. And as a people, that hasn't served us well, especially in the area of the creed. In other areas as well, but in the area of the creed. So one of the things we want to do is to begin the process of freeing our minds and allowing ourselves the God-given right to research, investigate, and evaluate the information that comes in front of us. And that's an ongoing process. No one is claiming to have all-encompassing knowledge of a subject. So research dictates that as you discover more, you make the appropriate adjustments at every stage of your research. And this is what we want from ourselves when we talk about the issue of Aqidah. Stop allowing people to bait you into ignorance by telling you, if you deal with this issue, you're causing fitna. If you deal with this issue, you are dividing the Muslims. If you deal with this issue, you are arguing. If you deal with this issue, you're debating. No, I'm not. None of the above. Actually, we're trying to find the truth, which we are obligated to do. And this is our job. We cannot be a group of Muslims who don't understand what we believe. This is a disaster. You don't know what you believe, and you cannot distinguish from your own side between truth and falsehood. According to the scholars, especially the Ashari scholars, some of the scholars, they said this faith is not valid. The faith that is only blind following of someone else without a certain conviction on your own is not valid. I want you to think about that. That means you have to know the belief yourself. You cannot say, well, my sheikh said, and that's what I base my belief on, what my sheikh said. No, it doesn't work. You yourself have to know. You yourself have to know. So I wanted to touch on the Ashari Creed in relation to the attributes of Allah. And I want to keep that as the point because let's just tackle one topic at a time. In relation to the attributes of Allah, we gave points last night. So we talked about 3 verses. Let's see, we can review quickly. What were those 3 verses that we mentioned as the foundation of Islamic belief in relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all Muslims agree upon without any departure from that? What are those 3 verses and what is the point that they got from those 3 verses? So what are the 3 verses first? All right, it's your turn. Because we're reviewing. It's my reflections, but our review. So what are the 3 verses? Because we have to have some Quran. Nah, Hamza, you got 1 right. Stacy got 1 right. 1 is missing. What's the other verse? So you got 42:11, that's true. 112 verse 4, that's true. Is 1 more verse, which to me is a very important verse in between those 2 verses. In meaning, I'm talking about, not in place. So what's the other verse? 16 verse 74. Right. So as our brother Ja'far put it, 42 verse 11, 16 verse 74, 112 verse 4. What is taken that is agreed upon by everybody from those verses? What is the point that is agreed upon by all Muslims, everyone who says I'm a Muslim, from those verses? What do we all grab from that? What do we understand? Not that Allah has no place. That's not the immediate understanding that comes from those verses. That's a derived understanding, which is true, but that's not the immediate understanding. Right. Is that Allah is not like his creation. Right? And Allah cannot be compared. That's the point. Nobody disagrees with that. Let's keep that in mind. No one, not even the Wahhabiyya, disagree with that. And now that I'm talking to you with no handcuffs on me, on my brain, or let's call them brain cuffs. In other words, I'm not talking in someone else's language. So I'm not speaking to you so I can fit in the talking points of somebody else. I'm talking to you as I understand and as I want you to understand from me what I'm saying. I'm not saying it in a way that will make Master happy that I use these terms. I don't like those terms you use. I don't care what you like. And I think we as a people need to get to that point. I don't care what you like. Just like you don't care how we end up. We're equal in that. So sometimes we be having conversations that's not the conversation. So sometimes I do things deliberately to tell the one who thinks he's our slave master, you don't run nothing. Deliberately. Right? So I'm having a double conversation. Those who understand what I'm saying, I'm really talking to you. Stop letting people control your mind and thoughts and your tongue who don't have your best interests. Learn to express yourself and understand yourself and be honest yourself. That's very important if you're going to have this kind of conversation. This is very important Sometimes we don't realize that we're intellectually handcuffed because we're so used to being inferior to others. So even when we talk inferior, right? Is the boss going to make sure I said this the right way? Who cares what the boss says? Did you understand? Okay, say it the way you understood it. Make sure your understanding is correct. It'll come out right. Don't use his words. In fact, don't use his words at all. Learn to use your own words. Do y'all got my point? So you don't have to be him, be you, and express yourself as you, as long as you say the truth, right? Okay, that was my rant. But it's an important rant because some of us are slaves and we don't realize it. I want to make free people because that's one of the things, that's one of the reasons we got corrupt Akida, because we slaves. We don't know how to free ourselves from someone else's mental subjugation of us. So while I'm talking about the issue, I'm trying to help us get free. So everyone agrees with that, even the Wahhabiyya. The Wahhabiyya will read those verses and they will say Allah is not like his creation, while they have an understanding that we totally disagree with, but their foundational base is that they themselves, even with their understanding, they believe that that understanding is consistent with the foundational creed that Allah does not resemble his creation. Is that understood? Is that understood? So the Ashari, the Maturidiyya, the Hanabila, and the Wahhabiyya do not disagree with the foundational point that we extract from those three verses. Is that clear for all of us? Because here's where you get into confusion when you don't understand that. And then when the nuance comes, you get confused. So if we understand the foundational belief, when the nuance comes, we know how to deal with it, right? So yesterday we said the problem is not in the recitation of the verses. Where does the problem and difficulty lie? Not in the recitation of the verse. We all agree with that. And the conclusion of the verse, we agree with that. Where does the contention come? The disagreement come? Inshallah, Hamza. You on it, Ak. You on it, Hamza. May Allah reward you. Not the translation. The understanding. Now, let me help you. Why did I say not the translation, Ja'far? Because we don't have to translate. This whole discussion exists in Arabic language prior to translation. Do y'all follow that? The same disagreement exists in Arabic language prior to translation. So even if you didn't translate, you're not going to escape the same problem. The problem still exists, even if it's in Arabic. It doesn't change. So don't think, and as some people are misunderstanding, they think when I learn Arabic, it's going to be different. No, it's not. If you keep the same understanding, it's going to be the same thing. It's not necessarily the translation. It's your understanding. Do y'all follow that? I'll give you a famous story that happened to us. Not saying that famous story, an incident that stays famous in my mind. One young brother, he's now a graduate from the University of Medina. I ain't seen him yet. I'm waiting for him to actually come do what he promised to do. but I ain't met him yet. He said to me before he went, he said, I'm going to go to the University of Medina. I'm going overseas. I'm going to study Arabic, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to refute you. And my reply to him was, I hope you go study, and I hope you come back after you know Arabic, and then we have this discussion still. I said, but let me tell you something. It's not going to change, because if you don't change your understanding, you're going to learn to say the same incorrect things in Arabic. That's the only difference. The same incorrect things you're saying in English, you're going to be able to say those incorrect things in Arabic. The issue is not going to change. So if you think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has meanings that are related meanings to created things, whether you say that in English, Arabic, French, German, or Chinese, it's the same thing. Your understanding is flawed. It has nothing to necessarily has nothing to do with language. It's that you don't understand the correct belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you follow the point? Yeah, this is false. This is a false understanding. Don't believe that, because that's another way of intellectual laziness. He says, I'm going to learn Arabic so the issue solved. Well, if the issue was solved when you learn Arabic, why the Arabs are disagreeing in the same issues we talking about in English? If learning Arabic was a solution to everything. Not saying that learning Arabic won't help, because you're going to still have the same discussion, but at least you're talking in the original language. At least you're understanding in the original text. So you don't have the translation barrier, but still the understanding can still be flawed, even if you don't translate, if you understand the point. So that's not necessarily a solution to a faulty understanding. Language is not the solution. Actually, learning the correct belief is the solution. And that's going to take your intellectual effort. And also, ultimately, guidance by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't get around that. Allah guides whom He wills, and He causes to go astray who He wills. That's a reality none of us can change. However, from our side, we have to make effort, right? And in fairness, do you think the one who's misguided himself wants to be misguided? Most of the time, that's not the case. They actually think they're right, but they're misguided. That's the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know, masha'Allahu kan wa ma lam yasha' lam yakun. Whatever Allah will to be shall be, and whatever Allah did not will to be shall not be. Right? That's Allah's business. Guidance and misguidance is under the control of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. None of us can control that. But we make effort from our side. And if Allah gives us tawfiq, if Allah creates in us the ability to obey Him, then we are winners. Ultimately, it's Allah's affair. However, we direct our intention towards a thing, we learn and we strive, and may Allah guide us, insha'Allah ta'ala. So that point is those 3 verses. We take from that the foundation. Now, how do you understand verses that could apparently lead to a problematic understanding for the one who was not guided by Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala? So we got the base. We have that understanding from the start. Now we come across verses that could be misunderstood if we don't have a firm understanding of the first part. What is the first part? From those three verses, that Allah does not resemble his creation. Now, we come to verses that talk about attributes of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, that the parent wording of those verses to the one who has a faulty understanding about the primary base could lead to understandings that are incorrect. So we mentioned two verses that are like that talk about two attributes of Allah that some people misunderstand. What are those two verses? We talked about them last night because I gave two verses as an example. I'm walking us through something, so when we get into more details, which I will do on my own, not on the Black Imams Roundtable, you have a basis to try to understand the discussion. I think that's so important. Instead of just telling you, don't worry about it. No, we have to worry about it. But we're capable of trying to understand. So what are those two verses that I mentioned that are misunderstood in relation to attributes of Allah? So I mentioned two verses. Do y'all remember what the two verses were? Hussein, what were the two verses I mentioned? Right. 20 verse 5, 48 verse 10. Right. So those two verses talks about two attributes of Allah. What are those attributes? It is the attribute of al-istiwa and the attribute of al-yad. Right? So those two verses, the first one, surah number 20, verse 5 that we mentioned, Allah said, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa. So the word istawa is used to refer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that attribute is al-istiwa, right? And then the other verse, yad Allahi fawqa aydihim. The word yad is an attribute of Allah that refers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if those two attributes are misunderstood, it could lead to giving Allah attributes that contradict the base that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not like his creation, if they're misunderstood. Is this clear for everyone? Because we're going to take a bold approach to this. Because we're trying to have the rubber meet the road, as Imam Naim would say, right? So for those verses, we mentioned the Ashari and the Maturidi, they're going to have this approach to those verses. The safest approach among them is they're going to recite those verses in Arabic. One, they're going to recite the verses in Arabic, number one. They're going to affirm the wording of those verses. That's part of the recital. They affirm it. They're going to leave the true meaning of those words to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they're going to declare Allah clear of resembling the creation. That's going to be their safest approach. Recite the verse, affirm the Arabic wording in the verse as attributes of Allah. Leave the meaning to Allah, declare Allah free of resembling the creation, and then I can add a fourth part, negate any howness or modality for Allah's attributes. That's going to be their safest approach. So from that approach, that safe approach of the Ashari and Maturidi, what is not going to happen when it comes to that verse? What's never going to happen according to the safest approach? What's not going to happen? And that would be more relating to us. What's not going to happen? What's not going to happen? Let me see if you caught it. Y'all with me? That's clear. You're not going to resemble all to the creation. That's clear. But there's something that's not going to happen that we keep doing, especially us as English-speaking people or others. What's not going to happen in that approach? It's obvious if we understood the points. Not debating, no. There's going to be no translation. Let me help you. There's going to be no translation. There's no such thing as a translation in that approach. So the whole recitation is going to be in Arabic and it's going to be left there. There's going to be no translation at all. Why? There's no need. You're reciting the verse. You're affirming. The verse is in Arabic. So you're affirming those words in Arabic language that Allah revealed. And you leave the true meaning to Allah. You negate Allah resembling the creation, and you don't attribute howness. There is no translation there. There's no translation. There's no room for a translation. Do y'all follow that? Is that part clear? There's no room for a translation at that point. That's the safest approach among them. The second way, they have another way, and that is usually when they're confronted with someone who has a misunderstanding about the attributes of Allah. What is that? They're going to say, this verse has a figurative interpretation that is befitting of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here you're going to have an explanation in Arabic. And from that explanation, you may come with a translation as well. Because you're no longer dealing with the word of revelation, you're dealing with an interpretation and a possible meaning that's befitting to the attributes of Allah, clearing him from resembling the creation, and other than the words of revelation. Is that clear? So they're going to assign a meaning that's a possible meaning that befits Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of making him dissimilar to the creation. However, in the Arabic language, it is a possible meaning for those words. That's called figurative interpretation. That's another approach. And usually that's done in the face of someone who has an anthropomorphic misunderstanding of those verses. In other words, they're understanding the verses in a way that resembles Allah to the creation. So that is a response to that. That's the normal reason why the Asharis and Maturidis took that approach. Other than that, the base approach is the first approach. Is this clear? So that's the Asharis and the Maturidis. That's their belief. That's their position. That's what is written in their books, like the books of Imam al-Nawawi, like the books of Imam al-Ghazali, like the books of Imam al-Laqani, like the books of Imam al-Sunusi, like the books of Imam al-Haddad, and others. All of those Asha'ira and Maturidiyya, the books of Imam al-Nasafi, all of those books, they have these type of approaches. This is their way. Now, the Hanabila are interesting. And how do we define the Hanabila in terms of what we're talking about? How do we define the Hanabila? We're engaging, we're reviewing, we're thinking. How do we describe the Hanabila in the context of which we're talking about in relation to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How do we define them? Type it in. I'm going to wait. Only tafweed, no ta'wil. No, that's not how we define them. We want to identify who they are. So they disagree with but particularly we mentioned they disagreed in the areas of the creed with a particular Hanbali scholar. We mentioned a particular person. Who is that? Because he's a very important figure, even in the Wahhabi understanding. Ibn Taymiyyah, right. So when we talk about the Hanbalis, the Hanabila, in our context, we're talking about those who disagreed in the areas of the creed about the attributes of Allah with Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah, and those who preceded him with those ideas, and those who came after him with those ideas. And the reason why we said that, because he became the focal point because of his notoriety and popularity. So he became a focal point, but he's not the only one who had those ideas. So they are in contrast to the ideas of Ibn Taymiyyah in relation to Allah and his attributes. Those Hanabila, they had two approaches to the attributes of Allah. The first approach is the approach of al-muhaddithin. So the approach al-muhaddithin are the scholars of hadith. This is their approach. In other words, they were people who stuck to the narration, its recital, and full stop. So, in other words, they get the verses and the hadith about the attributes of Allah, they recite them, they stop with the recitation, they declare Allah dissimilar for the creation, and that's it. They finish with it. Right? And in that, is an implicit denial of modality and howness. In it is an implicit denial of howness and modality. It's implicit. It may not be explicitly stated, but it's understood from context. In other words, since they're not talking about it and they refuse to have a conversation about it, they say this is a text, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ فَلَا تَضْرِبُوا لِلَّهِ الْأَمْثَالَ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. That's it. We don't talk about anything else. We don't have any other discussion. Just what the text said, relating the text, and declaring a law dissimilar from the creation. Right? The second approach of the Hanabila is the approach of al-mutakallimun. Al-mutakallimin, or al-mutakallimun, if we said it, of the Hanabila had a different approach. And their approach was to go in to a little more detail when it comes to explaining the attributes. Which means that they were more explicit in their terminology of denying howness and resembling and any resemblance to creation and ways that would be expressed. So they would use terms that the hadith scholars would refrain from to get to the same point. So you would find in the mutakallimun among the Hanbalis, you would find those theologians who use the science of theology or ilm al-kalam. In their texts, you would find them discussing terms that are not mentioned in the text by word in the Quran and the Sunnah, but the meanings were contained there. So they have those two approaches. So they would explicitly negate howness. They would negate Allah being a body, being in a place, being in a direction, where the muhaddithun among them would not have such a discussion. That's the Hanbali, two methodologies among them. Is these points clear? I'm gonna go in more detail about this, but not today. But so both of those approaches of the Hanabila are distinct in their own right from the approaches of the Asharis and Maturidis, but similar in the end result. Now the Wahhabiyya and Salafiyya, their approach is to recite those verses, to apply literal meanings to them, and apply a howness that is known to Allah, not His creation. But a howness does exist. While claiming with all of that, that Allah does not resemble His creation. And there is the difference between the Asharis, the Maturidis, those Hanabila from the Wahhabiyya, so-called Salafiyya. That's the area of disagreement. And I think that review would have made it clear. I'll leave you for any questions, just in clarifying to make sure you understand what I'm talking about. Please, as I always say, let's not go all over the place. Let's try to stick to the subject so we understand. Once we understand, if we need more details, then we go into more details. But let's make sure we understand what we're talking about. So was the review clear for you? So far, so good. How'd you, Stacy? Okay, good. Is it clear for everyone? And I had a question. Where was it? Imam, do you think a conference with the prominent black Salafi leading imams will be of any benefit, or would it be a more back and forth discussion without reaching a valid conclusion? Depends who's talking, right? And I would say it depends who's talking. If they have an understanding that we're just clarifying, not necessarily debating, it will be productive. If they come with the concept, I'm not trying to understand, I'm just trying to make myself right, then it will be fruitless. So it depends who's the person. Like, are you really trying to make sure we understand and let us choose what we believe is right? Or are you just trying to get your point across? And you're not interested if I understand or not, long as I agree with you, then I don't think that's going to be fruitful. Like, I'll give you something that happened at the conference, and I had to get out myself to deal with it. So at the Islamic Unity Conference, we had a Salafi person. And when he talked, he attacked the Asharis and the Sufis, right? And when I say attacked, he expressed that he disagreed with them and they have that's a foreign doctrine to us, and we need to get rid of all foreign doctrines. But never addressed the fact that Salafiyya, which he believes is a foreign doctrine to us too. You didn't mention that. You only mentioned the Asharis and the Sufis and others, but you didn't mention the Salafis. When all of it is foreign to us, the whole thing. So that's not fairness, right? If you wanted to be fair, you could have said, we're going to understand all this ourselves from the Quran and Sunnah, and all of these things are foreign to us. And we're going to look in the Quran and Sunnah ourselves and try to figure it out. Good luck, but I'm just saying, if you wanted to be fair, that would have been a more fair statement, right? Not to say your understanding and the methodology you take is like we knew that from the beginning. No, it's not. That came from Saudi Arabia, same place you got it from. What are you talking about? That's foreign too, right? Do you understand my point? But of course, at the conference, I address that to that person personally, but not in front of everybody on the stage, because that wasn't the purpose. The hold on, the back door.
The one all the way down there on the side of the building?
Yeah, the back, the women's door.
Okay.
I got you. I got only that.
Yeah, that's they only doing that front door.
All right.
They only got one door.
Okay, all right. So you're doing that one. All right.
Right.
So I gotta let him into that door. We let him into that door. So you can go back. I mean, he's probably gonna be better.
Yeah, they might have to go inside and go out because that door is broke.
All right.
Yeah, because that outdoors. Excuse me, 1 second. So I think that's the important thing. Once we have a serious discussion and it's fair, then I think it would be fruitful. And I wish we could have a discussion like that, honestly, not arguing, not taking someone else's beef and making it our own, right? We all strove to learn. We all went to the various places wherever we went to acquire knowledge. That's what we receive. Now we're in a position that we got to sort all this stuff out. You follow my point, Cameron? So it depends who's talking. And if one respects each other's differences, even if we disagree, then it's fruitful. We'll learn, right? I don't mind having a discussion when we're just trying to sort it out, right? I think that's healthy. We need to sort it out, don't we? Because whether we talk about it publicly or keep it in our hearts, isn't the result going to be the same? If I don't understand you, I'm going to be at enmity with you. If I understand you, maybe I may still disagree, but I understand how you got where you at, and the enmity will be removed. That's possible because I understand. I disagree with your approach. I'll give you an example. Y'all ready? This is my chance. Are y'all ready for another hour of hot dialogue? Because I'm getting ready to open up a can of worms to make my point. Y'all ready? Who wants a can of worms open? Stop. I got to get approval first because this is going to be a trigger. Some of you going to get triggered. Okay. Right now, many of us, especially in the Black community, are confronted with a serious challenge with this upcoming presidential election. Do we vote for Kamala Harris, or do we vote for an alternative candidate that has no chance of winning whatsoever, or do we vote for Donald Trump? This is the Black community. This is what we're faced with in America, right? Or do we do not vote at all? These are our options, right? And you're going to have heated debate among us which approach to take. Because many African Americans feel that we in a big problem. No matter where we go, we lose. Many of us are feeling that way right now. If I vote here, I'm going to get creamed. If I vote here, don't make a difference. If I vote here, I'm going to get creamed. And not voting doesn't work for us too. So you got a lot of African Americans in a dilemma right now. Are y'all aware of that? Are y'all aware of that? Now, so I'm having in my own family heated debates about this issue, right? Heated debates in my family. This morning, as I was coming to class, we were going back and forth about this issue. Some of us do not trust the Democratic machine at all. We don't trust them. We don't like the Republican machine, but we know a third party or an alternative party ain't going to win, so that's a wasted vote. So we are conscious enough to say we have to be involved for they take all of our rights. But voting for this Democratic machine has not served us. That's an argument. That's an argument, right? That's a feeling. Then there's others who say, but ain't no way in the world we're voting for Donald Trump and what he represents and you know the white supremacy and you know all the stuff. And then so that's an argument. But if I vote for that, that's a quiet white supremacy, and this is a loud white supremacy. The devil I am familiar with is better than the devil I'm hiding from, or the devil that's hiding from me. They got all these issues going on in the Black community. That's a discussion, right? But what Black people cannot afford to do is fall apart and become enemies for somebody else's system. That's what we can afford to do. And I think we all would agree on that. Now, how to do that's another story, despite our differences. Did y'all follow my discussion there? Did you follow my point? What we can't afford to do is fall apart over somebody else's issues. And others would love for us to fall apart so they can subjugate us all. Let us argue about who's going to be our slave master. And let us fight over that. At the end of the day, they're fine with that. Do you follow my point? So, in an analogous way, that's the same thing I'm talking about when we're talking about the Salafi, Ashari, all that. We're going to have the debate. But what we can't afford to do is turn on each other because someone imported some ideas to us. We're going to have to work it out. We're confronted with it. We have no choice. But how does it work out with us? It should never tear us apart at the heart level, at the family level, at the people level. But people are going to have their different choices. Do you follow my point? That's reality. So that's the way I believe that can be approached. But that takes mature people, right? That takes a mature person to be able to say, you know what? I totally disagree with you. However, I understand why you're saying what you're saying. And that's not going to make me hate you. I just don't agree with you. And we can continue to have that discussion and that debate and that dialogue, right? But for me and you, this stuff ain't going to separate us as a people. That's the challenge we have in all of our issues, right? Now we gotta work that out. Right? So that's why when that person made those Salafi statements, I didn't respond because I disagree. That's obvious. Everyone knows that. That's his feeling. Okay, we could discuss that. And I'm willing to discuss that, but not at the expense of our collective benefit, right? That's not a discussion I'm gonna have at the expense of our collective benefit. We're gonna have that discussion, but that discussion not gonna result in tearing us apart. And he understands that, and I understood that too. So he got a free punch. What can I say? He can have it. It's cool. I'll get him back privately, right? Do you understand my point? Because we're trying to actually do something that we collectively need. And that is more important than me arguing with a discussion that's going to be ongoing. That doesn't mean we're not going to have that discussion. I don't say avoid it. I don't say that. I just say that it depends in each situation when we're going to address it and how we're going to address it. And we're not going to get diverted from an important matter by another matter, even if that matter is more important, but it's not the subject matter at hand. We're not going to divert from the mission for something else that can be taken care of at another time and in another context. I just think that's a level of maturity that we got to have. Because that discussion goes deep, right? You know, you got all these reformed Salafis today. I'm not Salafi no more. Or that, if they call that Salafi, I'm not that. But all of them, mostly every single one of them, was on the same page as the ones they're now refuting. Do y'all know that? Very few of them were not direct students or secondary students of the same one they today say is extreme. And many of us innocent people don't realize that the game is being played on us. I'm just not like him, but I believe the same thing he believes. But I'm not like him. I'm not as harsh as him. But we're not talking about his harshness. We're talking about the misunderstanding. So because you're not harsh, if you still have the same misunderstanding, the issue is the same. It's a misunderstanding or incorrect understanding. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because he said harsh and you say it nice, it's still the same thing. Did y'all catch that? So they're fighting among each other with the same belief, but just who's harsh and who's not harsh. Who cares? I'm talking about the issue. He said that so nice. Yeah, he called me a kafir with a smiling face. He called me kafir angry. They both called me kafir. What difference do it make? It's the same thing. They consider me an idol worshiper. Whether they say it with a smile or with a frown, it's the same thing. The end result, they considered you a disbeliever, an innovator. No matter how they say it, it's the same thing. But for us, since he ain't holler at me, then he's my friend. No, he's not your friend. He just didn't holler at you. He didn't say, may Allah break your back. But at the heart level, he wants Allah to break your back. He just didn't say it. So it's the same thing. We get Trump, we're going to get some straight out right racists to come up. We keep the racists going to be there. They're just not going to be as vocal. They're going to do the same stuff, though. I hate such crazy analogies, but you get the point. Did y'all follow my point? I'm getting ready to bring this to a close, but I wanted us to understand that. um, Furqan, but we consider them the same. No, no, I don't say that. I don't judge, I'm talking about me personally. I don't judge the unlearned African American who's been given a doctrine without understanding everything, one way or the other. I say that person needs to continue to learn. They don't know. It ain't nobody trying to teach them. You act like you don't see racism in Islam sometime. I don't know what the heck we be looking at. You don't see that there's racist people that have racist practice in the name of Islam? You don't see that? That's not clear to you yet? I'm talking about to us as a people. I don't mean you particularly, right? You don't see that there's racism that exists and it comes into the way Islam is presented to us? You can't see that? Y'all been listening to Imam Naeem and watching, you can't see that yet? You can't see there's a double standard when it comes to us, even in Islam? You don't see that? Where have you been? What rock are you hiding under? Like, come on. Is that Islam? No. Is that what the Prophet ﷺ came to convey? No. Is that what the Quran came to convey? No. Is that what's happening? Yes. Now, what we're going to do about it is another story. But don't tell me it don't exist. Does it exist in every single person? Absolutely not. But is it a dominant presence in our dealings every day? Yes, it's obvious. No, we wouldn't be here having a Black Imams Roundtable if that wasn't the case. And that's not that we say that it's acceptable. That's not Islam. That's not what the Prophet ﷺ came to convey. But unfortunately, people are people. It is what it is. Nothing we can do. We can do something about it. It's going to take time, but we have to wake up and realize that it exists. It's real. It exists. I deal with it every day. I deal with it all the time in my local community. Right? And a lot of African American masjids, because of it, are fighting for their very survival. They lose their imams, they're gone. A lot of them are in that condition. The imam goes away, he dies, that community's getting taken from African Americans. Count on it. Never to return. And some of us have experienced that on the ground firsthand, all around the country, because we travel. So let's not act like things are not the way they are. Let's not be foolish. Right? Let's use our minds. So no, we don't feel the same. I don't feel that way. Actually, that's why I don't mind having the discussion. So hopefully we can work it out ourselves, because ain't nobody gonna work it out for us. They just gonna tell us the party line and keep us going. That's just the way it is. I think it's horrible, but it is what it is. We gotta live with it. We have to live with it. So, all right, with that, I'll close if there is not any more statements or questions. And I'll continue, inshallah. Maybe tomorrow I'll add some more of these points if Allah facilitates for me. Barakallahu bikum. Listen, let me request something of you. Hold on one second. We had a project that we're doing that we came up with at the Islamic Unity Conference. And this is specifically for Masjid Muhammad of Atlantic City, not the Black Imams Roundtable. This is specific for Masjid Muhammad of Atlantic City. We are trying to continue and increase these beneficial programs that we're doing, especially those on the ground. And we had a fundraiser with a lot of pledges, not actual people giving the resources. So it is a reminder that we wanted to have 100 people to give roughly $90 per month. Which would give us for the year a little over $100,000 to do this work, specifically for Masjid Muhammad. Because we have, we all have different communities, so we all have our own work, right? But Masjid Muhammad is the one putting on all these major programs, which are majorly expensive, right? I know we enjoy them, but they come with what they say, a hefty price tag to do the stuff we're doing. It's expensive, seriously. And we need your help to continue because we need to do more, right? We need to do more big programs that brings us all together because we can't keep doing it every year. It's not enough. It's not. The year will go and come and we'll be doing the same thing next year. We cannot afford to do that. We need to strategically, throughout the year, work on each issue collectively. That means we got to come together to do that. To come together, we got to facilitate that, which has a fee to that. It costs money. So we estimated that if we could do that, if we could get 100 of us to sign up, and these are the ways to donate, so you can make it recurring at $90 a month. Besides what else you do, like on the Black Roundtables, your $10. Besides that, serious people who really want us to accomplish our objectives. We got to make one place, establish, and build from that, right? And Masjid Muhammad has been at the forefront of this work with us in the 3453 family. So we're asking you, those who are able, to sign up to help us reach that objective, right? And those of you who made pledges, please fulfill those pledges, right? Because it will help us do the work. This takes resources. We're not supported by a government, whether a foreign government or the government of the United States. We are 501c3, and we have to do what every 501c3 has to do. We have to fundraise. We're not a business. We're not a for-profit organization or business. So the objective, it doesn't necessarily have a name. Our theme was building our village. And then we had levels of that: education, family, community. And we have projects that we're doing to actually generate money. One of the biggest projects that's coming, we're putting together, is we're going to do some skill training in the masjid that would help us all be free to do entrepreneur work or have a skill set that you can get a higher paying job. That's something we're going to do in the masjid. We're actually working on it. So we're going to have certain programs from the computer side that we train people. So now we can boost our economic status as a collective. We have a lot of things we got in the works. We're actually physically doing them on the ground right now. As I speak, someone is doing that now. And then continue with our efforts. Listen, this is hard work. And this ain't easy. And we're saying things that are not necessarily popular, but they are true. And if we talk in our own tongue, we all know it, right? If we all talk, forget what party you in, forget all that. We just African Americans, Black people from America. We have a common understanding and context, and we know it like we know the front and the back of our hands. From that base, yes, it will go to that project. We know our issue. There is a brother here. I haven't talked to him, right? But he's an elder, and I have a high respect for him, but I haven't really had a long conversation with him. And he's been doing this for years, and he understands the nature. Whether we agree on every single issue is not the point. In general, we have the same understanding of what we're confronted with. Now, how we go about that is another story. But we do understand the basis of what we're talking about, right? And I think that's a starting point. We got to be men, seriously, not puppets. And men can distinguish things and know how to work through differences. Men know how to do that. Men know how to do that, real men. And we need real Black Muslim men who actually understand the issues that we are confronted with as a people collectively. And we may disagree on creedal issues and even on fiqh issues. And we can have that discussion and we can have that understanding. But ultimately, we got to realize all this stuff was given to us and we got to sort it out. And collectively, when we do that, we'll get somewhere. And that's what this conference was about. And y'all saw it in practice. I mean, you had Imam Zaid Shakir, Dr. Ihsan Bagbi, Sheikh Abu Muslima, Sheikh Abdul Karim Yahya, Ustadha Aisha Prime, Sister Sabria Mills, Sister Ustadha Nuruddin Knight, Imam Rasul Suluki, Imam Mujahid Salam, Imam Wahyuddin Sharif, Imam Mikhail Shabazz, Imam Karib Bashir, from every different group that confronts African Americans were represented at that conference, the Shehu Jamaat. Every single group was represented. Everyone was there. And you saw what we could do when we sat down and just as men and women who have a common interest, we sit down and talk. We're not going to agree on everything, but we have a mutual understanding and a mutual respect for one another. You see what we can accomplish. It can be done, right? And it was done. And I think everyone walked away, especially our elders, walked away feeling like, wow, it ain't over. We still are in the fight. And I think that's important. I think that's extremely important. Even while we discuss these issues, we're not running from the issue. But those issues should not tear us apart. That's my only point. Right? That's my only point. And we need to do that in the country as a people. And I think the Muslims are the best suited to lead by example, because we need that as a people in the country, especially what we're facing here in this country. We need to learn to love one another, as I ended that conference. We need to learn to have a love for one another. And if we really love one another, we'll get a lot done. Trust me, a lot. And we need to. And anyone who's been in Islam for 40, 50 years in our community understand exactly what I'm talking about. Even if they can't accomplish the objective, they understand what we need to do. They do understand. And we just got to get out our own way. You know, may Allah give us tawfiq. May Allah make it easy for us. And let's pass to the next generation a legacy of cooperation in ways we can, and understanding in ways we can't. A level of cooperation in ways we can, and a level of understanding in ways we cannot. And inshallah, we would have done something good with our lives and existence on this planet. Inshallah, we'll talk later. Barakallahu bikum wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.